Police didn't do anything. Politicians didn't say anything because they don't have a backbone. So what are we supposed to do as citizens when we are just left at the whim of these activists? No condemnation. I mean, you look at Chaz Chop, right? And the climate that businesses and residents in that area were forced to live with for a month in the summer of 2020. They couldn't do anything about it. Politicians were actively supporting it, the summer of love. So yesterday on the show, we were talking about this attorney. His name is Ted Frank. He's the director of litigation. He's a senior attorney, director of litigation at Hamilton Lincoln Law Institute. And he was on social media in light of what happened in Seattle, but also elsewhere in the country because he's DC based. And he was saying, look, I think that it is time for private citizens to take matters into their own hands by filing lawsuits against the individual activists who are interfering in their lives. Ted Frank was nice enough to join us on the podcast to discuss what kind of cases these would be. Ted Frank, welcome to Undivided.
Thanks for having me.
You're my just favorite person of the week.
I'm glad to have met that qualification.
It's a high threshold. So we obviously had this blockade of the interstate in Seattle. This is not a new tactic in Seattle or really elsewhere in the country. We've seen it repeated over and over, whether it's a street, a bridge, a highway. It's your contention that citizens might be able to sue over this interruption in their lives. How so?
Well, for hundreds of years, there's the common law tort of false imprisonment. If I lock you in a room and won't let you out, it's an intentional tort, and you can sue me for that. And I think it's no different when you're blocking a highway and trapping people in their cars so that they can't get off the highway and that they're burdened accordingly. And it helps that it's illegal to block the highway like that. And citizens have the right to sue for nominal damages, just a token amount of damages, actual damages from any delays caused by this, and then punitive damages. And that can be a class action when it affects thousands of people who are suing over the identical issue, whether the people and more importantly, the organizations that would be sued acted illegally and wrongfully to the citizens hurt by these traffic jams caused by these illegal protests.
Now, would it have to be, you mentioned organizations there, would it have to be directed at, let's say, the Democratic Socialists of America, who've conducted some things like this and organized it in Seattle? Would it have to be directed at the organizer, or could it be directed at individual citizens who participated in the blockade?
Oh, absolutely at the individual citizens. But, there are hundreds of those. Maybe only a few dozen would be identifiable. Whatever, we would do discovery on police records. We would do discovery on the organizations. We would find out as many people as we could, and we would sue 100 other John Does. But most of these people are going to be judgment proof. I mean, Susan Sarandon blocking the Holland Tunnel, she's not judgment proof, and she could be potentially liable for quite a bit. But the typical left-wing activist who has time to stick their arms in a PVC tube, they're probably judgment proof, or it's going to be harder to get money from than the what you could get out of them.
Let me just judgment proof. That's just a really legal way of saying they live in their parents' basement, or
more or less,
okay.
Right? But we can get injunctions, and once it's an injunction and there's a court order, don't do this anymore. Then when they do it again, it's not just, well, do the police feel like arresting them? It's, you've committed criminal contempt, and you can get federal marshals after them, maybe. But the organizations, I think, are the more important linchpins of this. This is happening through on a nationwide basis through organizations that are intentionally trying to injure thousands of citizens in the name of promoting the terrorist groups.
So if it were organizational, because I agree with you, right? Not only from a monetary perspective, but also if you want to dismantle and stop some of these tactics from happening, going after the groups that are trying to organize and support these activities would be more effective. But I guess what would the burden of proof be there? What kind of material support would they have had to provide? Is it just organizational? Would they have had to fund it, et cetera?
Well, it's a conspiracy. When you're in a conspiracy, you're liable for everything that the conspiracy does. And there's potential aiding and abetting liability. And, surely they will say, oh, we just asked them to show up at Starbucks, and it's a coincidence that they spontaneously went to the highway and that we had the PVC tubes ready to go. At which point you subpoena the emails, you subpoena the text messages, and you subpoena the Facebook DMs. Maybe have to get it from Facebook and from Verizon, but you get this information, and you dig in and you find out to what extent the organizations were involved, and you let a jury decide.
Yeah, good news is a lot of them just brag about it. They put together the flyers, they tweet about it, they put out videos of themselves there, so that might make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, they're very proud of themselves.
They are very proud of themselves. Have you had any takers, any citizens who said, yeah, I was harmed in this and I want to sue?
We've had lots of people happy to tell us, I've been harmed, tell me when you win something. But, we need somebody to be the public face of the lawsuit, not just the public face, but actually the lead plaintiff directing the lawsuit. I can't come in as an officious intermeddler and say I'm suing on behalf of these people. I have to be representing somebody who was actually injured and is willing to have their name on the lawsuit, at which point, I can understand why somebody would not want to be. Sometimes their employer doesn't want to be targeted. Sometimes they don't want to be targeted. They're afraid of these very violent left-wing groups, and that's a reasonable fear. And, there's only so much the courts can do about that. But without somebody courageous like that willing to come forward, this is just, unfortunately, speculative talk.
Yeah, I mean, we had a viewer who was in the backup on I-5, had a medical emergency and couldn't get out of the backup. Certainly that's someone who would qualify to come to you, correct?
They would qualify, but it doesn't have to be that. It could just be in the backup. You were stuck in traffic an extra half hour. And for many people, it was more than a half hour. But, if there was some sort of material inconvenience to you because of an illegal activity, that's enough.
Yeah. Let's end with this, because this has been a frustration for a long time. I've been covering the same far left activists in Seattle for 13 years of my career here. And their tactics have changed over the years, but this in some form is a very similar one, and police have been hands off with them for a very long time. Do you think it would have a chilling effect if one of these lawsuits were able to be successful, or would they just change their tactics and plan things differently?
I mean, there's a whack-a-mole game going on. They would certainly have to adjust. It would certainly be harder to organize these things. Somebody is buying the PVC. Somebody has that on their credit cards. We can find out. And, at the margin, at least, there's some deterrence. If you're an organization that wants to be effective, you probably have money in the bank, and you can either have money in the bank or you can organize these illegal protests and get sued. And it's better to have an ineffective broke organization organizing them than a well-funded one.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great idea. Because I don't know, I feel like reasonable people are kind of out of options. The government won't do anything. The police are hogtied by the government, by politicians. And so maybe private citizens just have to start taking it into their own hands from a legal perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll let you know if we have anyone who wants to take you up on this.
That'd be great. Thanks a lot.
Someone do it. Someone be brave, be courageous. And I understand the concern, though, that he points out, that if you're going to put your name on a lawsuit against all these criminal activists who have done a lot of bad things, some of them throughout the years in Seattle, who clearly don't care about the law, I can see how that might be terrifying if you're like, I don't want them coming after me personally, physically, whatever it is. Someone's got to be